The Kruger Park remains one of the hardest hit areas. In a statement, authorities say day visits to the park remain closed to the public. They say access will only be limited to essential delivery vehicles, airport transfers and guests, with exiting overnight bookings at Berg in Louw, Pretoriuskop and Skukuza rest camps. SANParks Head of Communications, Louw, joins us now with the latest. Good evening and thank you for joining us here on Late Edition. Now, I believe Minister Willie Oukamp, MP and Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, was visiting the park today to assess damage. Can you tell us what he saw today and just talk to us about the damage at the park?
Well, the Minister, good evening to yourself as well, and thank you for having us. The Minister is actually spending his weekend at Kruger National Park. He's there today, he'll be there tomorrow, and I think departing sometime on Monday. And one of the things that he did is to do a flyover to look at a number of areas where the floods, of course, have had an impact. Letaba, for example, where he was, and from there also sought to talk to some of the media just to give him some of his own impressions. So as you can appreciate, the Minister did see the level of devastation the floods have caused, as it were now, though we can't give specific numbers to that, but the fact is that the impact has been there. In the area of Letaba, specifically where he was, the levels have gone a little bit down from where they were the last time, even though we have declared that rest camps still closed. The Minister also spoke, because you know what, part of what has happened is that on social media, a number of people have been coming forward showing some willingness to make some sort of contribution to the time that we must deal with repairs. The Minister essentially sort of like gave a blessing to this line of thinking, but then left it to us to try and sort out the details to make sure that whatever is put in place as a mechanism also operates in such a manner that there's proper accountability to those who would make a contribution. And we do welcome that, because for us it speaks to the very notion where SANParks says it's a custodian of national parks, but these national parks belong to South Africans. So, but really those are some of the reflections I can give from the Minister's visit today.
Are the rains easing up at all? Are flood waters starting to go down a bit?
There are parts where you're finding that happening, but really this is a touch and go situation, to be truthful with you. At some point, the Weather Service said that we're at level 6, then they spoke about level 10, then they went down to level 9. So it's not we can't be too firm at the moment to say to you things have cooled down. In fact, even today, we also had to airlift, I think, 54 guests from Satara and Crocodile in particular. So it's really sort of like a type of situation where you have to monitor it by the moment, because the one time you find that you have to take particular measures, safety precautions, that's why we reached a point where we say no more day visitors, only essential services will be allowed. And then also we focused attention on 3 of the camps that are particularly in the southern parts, which is Skukuza, Berg and Pretoriuskop. So we judge just things as they develop by the moment.
Can you tell us about some of the damage in the parks? I'm talking about to infrastructure mainly.
We'll have to do a proper firm tally after the fact, but what I can tell you is that the northern parts of Kruger are essentially really inaccessible. I mean, the park is kind of like cut in half at the moment, where the north is largely inaccessible. The north being the parts that are based in Limpopo. You would appreciate that Kruger National Park, one part of Kruger National Park is based in Mpumalanga, the other part is based in Limpopo. So the northern part in particular is quite inaccessible, damages on the roads, the part where in particular the floods has been quite vicious. We've reached a point where we had to close all of the gates in that part of the park as well. And also have had to close some of the camps as well in that part of the park. Some of the bridges themselves have been affected. Some of the staff residences as well. There's cases where the residences would be quite over-flooded. In fact, in Letaba, that is what happened as a case in point, and even Satara would be another example. So it's just how the situation is at the moment, one which I think on the one hand talks to us having to deal with the situation as it is now, but also one that says to us, from a point of climate resilience, moving forward into the future, how do we now begin to plan and implement differently when we do infrastructure rollouts?
All right, and then last question, I want to ask you about the animals in the park. Have any of them suffered or needed any rescuing? Have any of them died or drowned? Can you give us any kind of update, or is it still too soon to speak to that at this time?
I would say animals are probably the greatest survivors in this, if really you have to use such term as who survived. I mean, we haven't had any fatalities. I must make it clear. Nobody really has passed away in Kruger National Park because of these floods. And for that, we've been very, very grateful really for our own teams, our own staff. I really think they've been quite excellent throughout all of this time. And we also appreciate the positive comments we've received on social media. But on the wildlife in particular, they even, I think, have call it a sensor or a warning system that even works a bit earlier than even what your weather service may be able to alert us on. So they ordinarily would move to safer areas, higher ground in most cases. So we really haven't had a situation where we can say that wildlife has been negatively impacted. I must tell you as well that indeed the floods are not something to cherish too much because of some of the damages that they do bring, but it can also be good for the ecosystem, because you will see after the floods the kind of greenery and the beauty of the vegetation that will arise from this. And so your herbivores, other animals will then have more food to eat as well. So, you know, there's sort of like a positive and negative aspect to this impact of nature on the environment.
Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. SANParks Head of Communications, J.P. Louw, just saying there that animals have got an incredible way of knowing when to react to storms coming and move to higher ground or whatever whatever is needed. So at least at this time, there hasn't been loss of life in the Kruger National Park in terms of animals.